Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. Woke colleges are panicking. Trump starts massive crackdown on campus riots. And if you're Columbia University and you were counting on that extra $400 million from the government, which they were, this is not a good day for you. Because the Trump administration has said, look, we're going to follow the law here. And if you're not protecting your students, if you're not running a legitimate organization, you're going to be held accountable. There's no excuse for breaking the law. There's no excuse for not protecting your students. If you want to do business with the federal government, at the very least, you have to comply with the law. Coming from Politico, a $400 million punishment for Columbia University from the Trump administration. The administration said Columbia's grants were scrutinized because of the school's continued inaction in the face of persistent harassment of Jewish students. And everybody has the right to protest, but you can't go and harass students and prevent them from being able to attend school. When you get physical with people, that's not free expression. The Justice Department Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism, led by Leo Terrell. Yes, Leo Terrell is another media personality that appeared frequently on Fox. He's been probing 10 institutions because of their responses to anti-Semitic incidents on campuses since the October 7, 2023 Hamas attacks on Israel. But Columbia, which faced intense scrutiny for its students' high-profile anti-war encampment and building occupations last spring, is the first institution to have its grants and contracts frozen. It's the first, and there are going to be others. And these schools really do have to be brought under control. You can't have mob rule by these far-left administrators. Quote, freezing the funds is one of the tools we're using to respond to this spike in anti-Semitism. This is only the beginning, said Terrell, who also serves as senior counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Quote, canceling these taxpayer funds is our strongest signal yet that the federal government is not going to be a party to an educational institution like Columbia that does not protect Jewish students and staff. From InsideHigherEd.com, contract cuts at Columbia raise concerns. Inside Higher Ed is a great website to understand institutionally how the administrators are actually thinking and how they're going to respond. And even that headline that contract cuts at Columbia are raising concerns, it's not raising concerns. It's causing them to completely freak out because they know they're all very dependent on federal grants and federal contracts. We did a video recently about the NIH grants and the limitation on what the Trump administration wants to pay for overhead, which is like their administrative expenses to pay salaries. And yeah, a lot of that goes to their very expensive, bloated administrative staff that get paid a lot, but don't necessarily actually do that much productive. Higher ed and free speech advocates are deeply alarmed by the decision to cancel $400 million in contracts and grants at the university, saying it's yet another example of executive overreach. Well, it's the executive that's reaching over and giving you that money. Now they're just taking the money back or not giving you any money. So if you don't want to do business with the executive and you don't want to follow the law, don't take their damn money. That's all they're saying. The Trump administration announced Friday that it's cutting $400 million in grants and contracts from Columbia University as a result of what Republican officials say is continued inaction and failure to protect Jewish students at the Ivy League institution. These accusations were made in a joint news release from the Department of Justice, Health and Human Services, Education, and the General Services Administration, all of which are members of an anti-Semitism task force the president has assembled just 1 month ago through an executive order. So this is not just the Department of Education. This is multiple departments within the federal government getting together in a task force saying, look, we're going to target and go after you schools. Earlier in the week, the task force said it was reviewing Columbia's $5 billion in federal grants and hinted that it could hold some of the university's contracts. So it may not just be $400 million. It may go into the billions at just Columbia alone. That notice was the task force's first major action, and other universities could face similar reviews, experts said Friday. Quote, for too long, Columbia has abandoned that obligation to Jewish students studying on its campus, Education Secretary Linda McMahon said in the release. Today, we demonstrate to Columbia and other universities that we will not tolerate their appalling inaction any longer. Many of these universities also get funded from foreign governments, from countries like Qatar that have their own view on what is and isn't appropriate in American universities. And let's just say it's contrary to the current administration's view. It remains uncertain exactly what grants and contracts will be affected, and the Department of Education did not respond to Inside Higher Ed's request for clarity. They're going to make you wait on this one for a little bit. And I bet you it's going to get worse than $400 million. Columbia officials said in a statement Friday afternoon that the university is reviewing the announcement and pledged to work with the federal government to restore Columbia's federal funding. Interim President Katrina Armstrong later told the campus community that the university will both address anti-Semitism and maintain its commitment to free expression. Quote, there is no question that the cancellation of these funds will immediately impact research and other critical functions of the university impacting students, faculty, staff, research, and patient care. But let me be very clear. Columbia is taking the government's action very seriously, she wrote. It is during periods like this that our collective dedication to this institution and our mission takes on critical importance. And these elite Ivy League universities, Columbia is one of them, have massive endowments. Those are investment funds, donations, surpluses that they get in the billions and billions of dollars on their own. They can spend their own money. It's not impossible for them to do that. And maybe they do need to do that as they work through their changes. Columbia has been a frequent target for Republicans who have taken issue with how colleges respond to a spate of demonstrations protesting Israel's war in Gaza since October 7, 2023. That criticism ratcheted up last spring after pro-Palestinian student protesters erected an encampment of tents and later took over a campus building in hopes of persuading the university to divest from companies affiliated with Israel. Those protests and Columbia's decision to call in city police in response not only sparked a national movement, but also attracted strong opposition from critics who declared the demonstrators anti-Semitic and accused the colleges of failing to defend Jewish students. These Jewish students had nothing to do with whatever was going on overseas in the Middle East. Trump officials have pledged to crack down on campus anti-Semitism, and this action against Columbia could serve as an early test case of exactly how the new administration could follow through on campaign trail promises. But canceling a university's grants and contracts would be unprecedented. Higher education policy experts say that even if it's just a threat, the concept of pulling funds without proper investigation from the Office of Civil Rights is deeply alarming. It should be deeply alarming. The Office of Civil Rights would come through the Education Department and try to evaluate what's been going on. It would be a long-term investigation. They would have a lot of warning at the university. This is a little bit different. This is like saying, hey, guess what? You're fired, and we're not going to give you this money you were counting on. And the university has staff, projects, all kinds of things planned around getting that beautiful federal money that they could just program into their university and continue with their institution. The institution cannot continue without funding, because what would be even more crazy for these guys would be to actually use their own money in their endowments to fund their operations. They would never want to do that. But in this case, they might be forced to do that. Quote, you don't get to punish people just because you don't like what they're doing, said John Fansmith, Senior Vice President of Government Relations at the American Council on Education. The fact that the administration is choosing to simply ignore not just precedent, not just norms, but actual law covering this should be concerning to a lot of people, not just the people at Columbia. Au contraire, John Fansmith. Yes, the administration can do this, and you can dispute it, you can sue them, and good luck in court. The Education Department's Office for Civil Rights is tasked with enforcing Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination based on race and national origin, including anti-Semitic and Islamophobic discrimination. The department's rules and regulations, which Fansmith said are mandated by Title VI, outline how OCR conducts investigations and what to do if the office finds a violation. OCR is required to attempt to reach a resolution with the institution. In the rare case that a college refuses to comply with the law, the case can be referred to the Department of Justice to buy them yet even more time. Quote, so while the law doesn't specifically dictate the process, it dictates the necessity of the process, Fansmith said. Nowhere in federal law is the government given the authority to arbitrarily select different types of federal funding and withhold them from an institution absent any prior finding or decision. The prior administration did that with almost all of its education grants. So all the money that got paid out for DEI, that was because DEI was made a requirement of receiving any federal money. Also because a lot of those educational institutions wanted to push the nonsense. But of course, there's precedent for the federal government saying, no, we're going to make you do this or you're not going to get this money. And if this guy thinks he's in control of federal funds, he's kind of not. Republicans from the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, on the other hand, praised the decision. Quote, Americans do not want their money sent to institutions that serve as breeding grounds for hatred and support for terrorism. according to Representative Tim Walberg, the Michigan Republican who chairs the committee. And he said this in a statement, quote, "I applaud the Trump administration for listening to the American people and holding institutions accountable when they fail to combat anti-Semitic, anti-American values." Last spring, Walberg and then committee chair Representative Virginia Foxx were key figures in a scathing interrogation of then Columbia President Minosh Shafik. They also subpoenaed the university for records in August and published a deep dive campus anti-Semitism report in November. But these congressional actions, as well as the department's civil rights investigations, are separate from the actions of the task force. The entire House report would be what I'm sure many people would consider a great piece of evidence in an OCR investigation, according to Fansmith. The Trump administration is just missing the step where OCR does an investigation, which they're required to do in statute. The statement said that Columbia should expect more cancellations. Yeah, it's not just the $400 million. When you are tied up with the government for $5 billion and you do stuff like this, you're going to be held accountable when the government changes. That's just what happens. Similarly to Fansmith, First Amendment advocates see the Trump administration's move as an overreach designed to intimidate institutions and chill campus free speech rather than address civil rights violations and hate speech. Kristen Shavardian, a program director for campus free speech at PEN America, said in a statement that while universities must urgently respond to concerns about anti-Semitism and ensure that students can participate fully and equally in campus life, because they have not allowed their own students who are paying for tuition to walk around freely on the campus, socially, or even go to classes. The kids are there in fear. I mean, you control the institution. You have to make it so it's safe for anyone, regardless of their race, their skin color, or their religious affiliation or sexual preference. They should be able to safely walk from a class to another class, maybe go to a dorm, normal things like that. It's the institution's responsibility to do that. What do you want, vigilantes protecting other students at the university? Is that the plan? But this program director says that while students have a right to do that, they also need to give the institutions space, time, and resources to do this. The task force has not allowed that, and as a result, federal research funding hangs in the balance. The Trump administration is, quote, weaponizing nearly every instrument it has to suppress ideas it disfavors and pressure institutions into enforcing ideological sentiments, she said. The threat is sure to reverberate across the higher education sector, just as it seems intended to do so. Yes, it is to send a message, and you are the first, but there will be others. They do the same thing when they're pushing their DEI stuff, so why would they not expect this to happen in reverse, trying to return to something normal where people can safely walk from class to class? Of course they're going to do that. Tyler Coward, I don't name him, I just read him, lead counsel of government affairs at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, told Inside Higher Ed that the loss of funds is a potential consequence for institutions that violate anti-discrimination law. They may only face liability if they fail to address the unlawful contact. They may only face liability if they fail to address the unlawful conduct. Quote, if the administration is cutting funding to Columbia for violating Title VI, it must be clear and transparent about how it arrived at that decision and follow all relevant procedural requirements before doing so, according to Mr. Coward. And First Amendment protected speech cannot be punished with the retraction of federal funds, he added. Fansmith said he was not in a position to say whether Columbia's response to the student protests, building raids, and encampments of 2024 would qualify for punishment under a proper OCR investigation. But the Trump administration clearly thinks so, he added. Quote, if they're so certain of what the outcome will be, then there's no harm from conducting an investigation, he said. But there's plenty of harm from not doing it. Well, they're going to do their investigation. They're just going to take the money first. And if you guys make it through the investigation, which you probably won't, then maybe you'll get the money back. Or maybe you won't because you forced them to do an investigation because you didn't provide a safe environment on your campus. Right-leaning advocates for the protection of Jewish students and faculty members say the move was justified and necessary. Kenneth Marcus, a prominent civil rights lawyer who ran OCR during Trump's first term, described Trump's latest actions as incredible. Quote, if anyone wasn't paying attention before, this will get their attention, said Marcus, who also founded the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights under law. Quote, there can now be no doubt that the Trump administration has prioritized campus anti-Semitism far higher than any prior administration has done. They have Columbia University in their scopes today, but no one should doubt that they will be coming after other universities as well. And the Trump administration doesn't care about Columbia University one way or the other. It's whoever is violating this and creating a dangerous physical situation for students while they're on campus, they're in trouble. They're going to get it. McMahon affirmed Marcus's take on the situation in an interview with Fox News shortly after the funding cuts were announced. Quote, the president has said he's absolutely not going to allow federal funds to be going to these universities that continue to allow anti-Semitism, she said. Kids ought to go to college and parents ought to feel good about their kids going to college, knowing they're in a safe environment. Marcus also applauded the Trump administration for utilizing multiple agencies to tackle the problem at once. The Department of Justice was minimally involved in responding to campus anti-Semitism during Trump's first term, he said, but this time the DOJ is leading the charge and the difference is palpable. This weekend, all university administrators should be meeting with their general counsels and ensuring that they're doing everything they can to protect all students, according to Marcus. And that is great legal advice, and they should document that and show that they're really taking action. And they should also reach out in advance to the Trump administration, contact the task force, pick Leo Terrell, he seems nice, and say, look, we're working on this problem. We understand you guys are serious. We want to make an example out of ourselves about how we're going to respond to the concerns of this task force. That's how you keep yourself out of trouble. You reach out in advance and say, look, on good faith, I understand you have the authority here. I want to work with you and make this right. That's an institution that's not going to have their funding taken away. Marcus continued, quote, the last administration spoke of a whole of government approach. This administration is walking the talk, he said. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.